So I've just finished chatting with one of the coolest people in wine. Seriously, have you ever met someone who you just really, really want to have at a dinner party, who always has an amazing story to tell, particularly through lived experience? Well, that's Anna Martens. She's awesome, an Aussie-born winemaker who cut her teeth working for Brian Crozer at Petaluma alongside Peter Dredge. Anna quickly left overseas and developed a serious pedigree of her own, working for the likes of Ornellaia in Tuscany and Passapisciaro in Sicily. From there, she established Vino di Anna, a winery on the northern slopes of Mount Etna, producing some seriously delicious wines on a more hardcore natural bent. And she should know. Her partner's Eric Naru, who started Le Cave de Perrenne, a really important importer in the UK. Anna has been around some of the greatest wines of our time and knows many intimately well. Laura and I actually had the pleasure of visiting a winery way back in 2014, and when I reached out to have a chat with her remotely, she actually surprised me in saying she's actually in Adelaide. So we managed to get her into the studio for a bit of blind tasting and a bit of a chat. Check it out.
Because you guys are a bit of a rock star couple.
I'm not sure we're a rock star couple. We're old. Maybe rock stars are old, actually.
I completely spaced when I was doing the research for this interview, and which, by the way, it's just uncanny that you're here because I contacted you initially to do a Zoom call.
I know, and I was literally knee deep in grapes when I took the message. It's like, no, I can't deal with this now. I've got 30 people for lunch. People are picking. I'm in the ferments, and
it's just our luck that you're from Adelaide.
And then you got back to me, and I was like, actually, I'm going to be in Adelaide next week. So that was really funny.
It worked so well.
This is just the perfect stars aligned.
So
Absolutely.
To bring the audience up to speed, because I want to talk about Nord-Sud, and I want to talk about what's going on there. I want to talk about like why you're in Adelaide, but born and bred here, worked Petaluma under the School of Crozer, big wig. Also worked alongside probably the most loved winemaker on the channel in the community, which is Peter Dredge.
Oh, Dredgy.
Yeah, he keeps winning wine of the week every week. Guy's Midas touch. Then went to Ornellaia for 5 years?
Oh,
4 years?
yeah, I do in vintages. So I was there 2001, 2, 3. I was actually back here in the hills in 2004. So not quite. And then I was working for another biodynamic estate on the Tuscan coastline called in Ripabella, called Caerosa in 2005 and 2006.
And then you went down to Etna to Passapisciaro?
I went to Etna in 2007 to Passapisciaro. But I was actually making wine in South Africa at the time. So, yeah, I was sort of doing vintages in 2005, 2006, 2007 in Italy, but then I was, kind of moonlighting in a few other places. So
you've gone, and now, of course, with Vino di Anna and with Eric has an importation company. You both have an importation company.
No, not me at all.
It's just Eric?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Eric created his business about 35 years ago.
And that's not an insignificant business. That's amazing. That's Le Cave de Perrenne.
Yeah, Le Cave de Perrenne would be, I think the most important, definitely in the UK, wine importing business that he started from scratch with a group of friends when he was in his early 20s. So.
That's how the foresight to bring in producers like Ariana Occhipinti, Cos, some of these amazing producers is just nuts. I'm sure, because even I suppose, because you guys met, 2001?
No, later than that, 2004.
2004. Now that was, the world really changed after 2010. Etna exploded literally onto the scene significantly. You were well and truly before that as well. Did you ever see this panning out the way that it's panned out?
No, and I don't think, a lot of people say, oh, you're really lucky, you're on Etna. And it was kind of like, well, the Etna we moved to and started to do Vino di Anna was not the Etna that's today. We probably couldn't afford to do it today, actually. We really went with, we haven't taken any investors, and we really went with a husband and wife with a young kid and, created everything from scratch. So I think we've grown osmosisly, and everything hasn't been a struggle, but Eric's someone that has got a huge amount of ideas and is always very forward thinking. And then, lots of projects on the go around the world. Between restaurants to wine importing to, he has an incredible project called the Terroir Project, which is a conversation for another time with him. And then, making Vino di Anna was kind of like, well, let's start with this. And then we got, offered the opportunity to buy a vineyard one day. We weren't looking for a vineyard. And, we came back and at lunchtime we'd bought another half a hectare of vineyard. Sort of literally a little bit later, someone else has said, I hear you might be looking. And we got offered something else. So it just was small by small by small, we kind of grew from 2007. And then how to pay for it and how we're actually going to do this with 2 small kids in tow, that we sort of work out as we go along. So
how does that work?
It's all a journey.
It must be a lot of logistics.
It is quite a lot of logistics, and we're still pen and paper. So when you sent me a Google invite, I couldn't even get my Google invite to work. And my teenage kids had to say, Mum, you're in Athens time. He's not asking you for 3:30 in the morning.
We're going to meet at 3:30 a.m.? I'm like, no. I think your
dear.
timeline's off. Yeah.
So no, we still do sit with pen and paper, or I like a pencil and paper. Our diaries are actually written diaries, so we're a bit old school that way. So logistically, yeah, it's quite funny when people say, so what are you doing at Christmas time? It's like, I'm not even too sure where I am next weekend or where Eric is, but one of us needs to be with our teenage boys. That's the key thing. So no matter what the travel is and where we are in the world, someone has to be with them wherever they are, which at the moment is in London.
So that is your base of sort of operation at the
yeah,
moment?
Base of operation and family, because Le Cave de Perrine is based in the UK.
Yeah.
So Eric, when I met him, that was his home. He was actually renting an apartment in Logroño in Spain, learning Spanish to, Le Cave de Perrine started with French wines from the southwest of France, where Eric's from, and but then sort of expanded into Spanish wines. And Eric doesn't do anything by halves. He will then move to the country for a period of time, learn the language, and do region by region, wine bar by wine bar, and expand the list that way. So I met him in 2004 when he was doing exactly that in Italy. He was renting an apartment from a friend of mine, studying at Pisa, Italian, and Pisa University, and then he'd spend, the times when he wasn't being a student, travelling across Italy, north, south, east, west, buying and searching out
Just
producers.
fully immersing himself in
Absolutely.
every single place, so he can really give you that actual representation. I know this, I've been here, I've lived this, I've read this.
Absolutely. And he wants to give everyone that has something a voice. So it doesn't matter. I mean, he can have, 5 wineries or 5 wine producers, I should say, within a tiny region. But if what you're making, Jess, is different from what Brendan's doing, from what I'm trying to do, he just thinks, well, we'll sell it. There's a story behind it, there's a sense, there's a place, etc. Vino di Anna, Vino di Anna is the name that we gave the company, but it's very much both him and I. And if anything, he's stronger than I in the vineyards. So I'm obviously classically trained here in Adelaide and, have gone through making wines in cellars and some of the most incredible cellars around the world. And for, some pretty big projects. I think my most scariest vintage was in 2008 when I was actually making very expensive wines for Andrea Franchetti, but making our first 2 Masteloni for ourselves with, knowing that it literally had to be the vineyards. We were working in the afternoons and, no chemicals, it needed to work out. We didn't want to fine it. We didn't want to filter it. We didn't want to add sulfur and
Nowhere to hide, basically.
Yeah, and put your name on it.
You went from the School of Crozer to what is that? Like that is quite.
Thankfully, I had the
180.
School of Crozer. I mean, there's not a day I go by that we don't look and analyze our wines with our mouth, with our taste. We look at, we don't have a laboratory at the winery because, thank you, Brian, I spent too much time, too many years. So on purpose, we actually only have, something to take the density of the wines, and we have a refractometer. I choose not even to be able to measure. Well, we don't add sulfur, so we don't need to have the equipment to add sulfur. pH, TA, we can't add acid.
So you don't
so
need that
we
either.
don't need to know what we get from the vineyards is what we have to deal with. And so, we do analysis pre-bottling, but we do analysis the last few years, definitely after fermentation. The first few years we weren't doing analysis at all, literally until, the day of bottling, because we weren't going to adjust anything, and it worked very well. But more recent years, we've had some very challenging years on Mount Etna. And
What's challenging? What's been challenging about that?
well, the weather's changed completely. We're having a lot of very hot, very dry. We had last year in 2023, we had downy mildew like it had never happened on Mount Etna for 80 plus years, and literally everyone, we lost 85% of our crop in 10 days.
Devastating.
And the time of flowering of Nerello Muscalese, everything got frozen on the vine. Little bunches. I've got some incredible I love taking photos, so I've got some incredible photos. And we don't use copper in our vineyards, and we just weren't prepared, none of us, for what would happen. And it just went through that side of the northern slopes. And so yes, thankfully this year we had a very good crop. It looks like the weather potentially in April, May, which is our spring, we might be in that situation, that pressure again, but thankfully then it just got super hot and no rain, and any sign of anything sort of fungal had no chance to continue. Hail is incredibly damaging. So we have, like the north of Italy, we do have freak hailstorms during the month of August and September and October. And for harvest, us is the end of September, beginning of October. Then we have to deal with wildfires, which are purposely lit. So they shouldn't be called wildfires, but fires out of control.
People just,
People light fires to burn vineyards or to burn the land. Well, not really to burn vineyards, to burn land.
To clear it.
Yeah, to clear it, and so animals can graze. And there's a whole conspiracy theory that probably won't go into. And then the latest thing this year, as it had been so hot and so dry, we had not such a big issue with birds, but with cinghiali, so with wild pigs.
Wild boars,
Okay.
yeah.
So our key top vineyard that we've been painstakingly working, within 3 or 4 days they'd eaten 1,500 kilos. So they ate the whole vineyard, all the grapes that we were looking forward to.
Are they just rampant in the area?
Well, we're in the national park, that vineyard, so there's no chance to, and all the vineyards beneath it, all
Can't
the
go shoot
land
them.
beneath it.
They're all protected.
Really?
Well, no, you can't shoot, you can't have a cannon. The property is a very random, hicklety-picklety 2-hectare property. So we're going to try and do an electric fence, but, I think it was a bit of a challenge. But
For clarity.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like,
Okay,
I'm just
for
thinking,
clarity.
like, pigs, what?
No, so
mind
the
is
cannon is an air cannon. They're not trying to defeat the pigs with an actual
Okay, I was-
sea shanty cannon.
Okay, because
Like,
in my mind, I'm thinking like Napoleon's come back and he's just blasting pigs into outer space in Italy. And thank you for clarifying that. 'Cause
air cannon. Definitely the community would have a lot of fun with that one. Do you have issues with the pumice stone? Do they, like, you've brought this, which is nuts.
Oh, it's so cool.
Look,
So
I
that's
think
from Etna. Does that damage the vines?
on our side of the volcano and where the northern slopes where we're located, no. Thankfully, when Etna's erupting, and thankfully she's erupting regularly, because the problem with a volcano is when it goes quiet and isn't constantly smoking, then you're up for a big eruption, like can happen on Stromboli, the island off the coast. The way the winds blow, we end up with sort of the light sort of pumice and cinders coming into our vineyards every now, or into our area every now and again. The majority of it goes to the other side of Mount Etna, so around Milo, on one of the other slopes, and down to Jare, the Catania airport gets closed regularly because of that. And there you can actually see very large pieces of volcanic ash stuck in vines or bunches of grapes, etc. Our side, no. This is a sprinkling actually just from one particular vineyard, and it's basically free fertilizer. I mean, the amount of minerals that are in there.
Carbon.
I mean, we're working
Yeah.
on basalt soil, so decomposed lava soils. So it's just full of
So
magnesium, iron, and it gives all of our wines a minerality to them and a salinity and a sapidity that, we are just trying to, use the grape as the vehicle to get that into the glass. But it's just so delicious. It's really quite exciting.
What's the reaction to a Aussie woman on the northern slopes of Etna making wines like this? Like, did you get a lot of support?
I think we did, because at the time I was working for someone else full time, and I came down from working as a manager of a wine estate, and my role as my professional career went on and on and on. I was not spending time actually in the vineyards. I was spending too much time, doing the logistics of
Pushing paper.
Pushing paper. So when I took the job with Andrea Franchetti. The idea was Eric and I were potentially interested to make some wine, but we sort of thought, well, we're not quite too sure what Mount Etna, could give us, and whether it was the place for us to then, invest. Was I needed to work in the vineyards. I couldn't just come down as his enologist or as his winemaker. I wanted to learn from the ground up. And so, be involved in pruning, being involved in the whole growing season. And so I was very lucky. We created a community very quickly, and the winery I was working with was at that stage literally 5 families, whether it was the wives, the aunts, the uncles, the kids. We were, we were welcomed, Derek and I, into a community that then they were the people that came to pick our grapes in 2008. And, I've watched, children grow up from being 5 years old now to, themselves studying wine or working in vineyards. So, and being Australian and a French, Eric and I like to keep quite a low profile. Yeah. So our wines are Vino di Tavola. We don't enter into any of the DOCs or any of the tastings. We're not part of the consortio. We farm definitely organically. We've farmed biodynamically, but we've never been certified. Really, it's a question of time. At that stage, we had a couple of young kids, and we just wanted to focus on what we want to do. We didn't want to be here proclaiming anything. It was sort of our journey and our joint journey as a couple that each year we seem to have, gained another person to our team, and we've got an incredible team, of local. They were young, they're all in they were all 18, 19 when they joined us. And so, now 15 years later, Tonino, Valerio, Nino are now all in their early 30s. But, they came to our place out of school to help us pick grapes. And, we've sort of grown and we've taught them, they've taught us. And, Vino di Anna has grown sort of, I suppose osmosisly that way. So we've, got a wonderful community.
What's actually involved with going from Vino di Tavola to like DOC Etna Rosso? What do you have? I
think the first thing is the location of your vineyards. So the vineyards that we were working even in the first year for Vino di Anna, they were too high. So they were outside the DOC. So there's sort of, there's a 1,000 metre road that circumnavigates Etna called the Quota Mille. And when we first went to Etna, we were warned, okay, if you're looking for vineyards, the vineyards above the road, that's the limit. Maybe every 5-6 years they'll ripen to give you a red wine, but be really careful. You're not actually going to be able to make something of 12 and a half or a ripe red wine. It's going to be, either a rosé, or you're just not going to get, full phenolic ripeness. That's obviously not the case. I mean, the weather has changed so much on Etna in the past 10 years.
As it has everywhere.
Definitely. So Eric and I, I love acidity, as does Eric, and we love tension in our wine. And we try with our vinification techniques to maximize the tension that we get in our grapes from the vineyards. So for us, the higher the vineyard, the more isolated the vineyard was the best. That's what the parcels that we've chosen. So we were already straight away outside of the DOC. One of the vineyards that we took the fruit from, the DOC went through the vineyard. What part of the vineyard was actually within the delineated area to be able to call it an Etna Rosso.
So
half the vineyards in, half the vineyards out.
Exactly.
But I don't quite understand. You go.
How do you delineate that?
Yeah, but you go closer to the caldera of Etna, and you become not Etna.
Yeah, well, exactly. You can't say. Well, you sort of think about the slopes of where things are, and so there was sort of these rulings were done decades ago.
Wow.
And they've modified a little bit, etc. of where the DOC and where the vineyards need to be. Some of the, for me, the most exciting and key vineyards were outside where the DOC, where it was deemed to be the best. And probably, truthfully, 20 years ago, those vineyards weren't ripening to the levels they are now.
They were these higher. Have old vineyards?
These are 80 to 90 to 100 years old.
So they've been there for 80 to 90 years,
Yeah.
and people still don't think that's sort of Etna Rosso.
Well, you can't just quite change those laws sort of overnight just because someone's actually now farming that vineyard. And before, you have to sort of think the heyday of Etna was it was all about production. You know, I mean, Etna used to be widely planted in a lot of terraces, and because phylloxera won't exist and can't survive in these basalt lava stone, you know, sort of soils and this pumice that's there, you know, the vineyards were all about production, big volumes, and you know, it was sold vino sfuso, so it was sold as bulk wines to go to Tuscany and, you know, beef up the Chiantis, to go to the north of Italy and beef up sort of all the reds, to go across to France. So Etna, you know,
it's more like that sort of bulk market
Definitely.
sort of a vibe. Well, we've got, I suppose we could liken it to the Riverland here.
Yeah.
Doing that sort of bulk market thing.
A lot of
sending it over
Sicily was
here.
that way, wasn't it?
yeah, no one was bottling their own wines on Mount Etna. The majority of wines, even when, you know, we came to Etna, there was sort of maybe 20 wineries that were actually bottling their wines and selling it. A lot of the grapes were going or being harvested by people in Calabria and being sold as wines from Calabria. And, you know, so there's been a huge
So they're allowed
shift.
to do that.
They were, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's done discreetly.
Yeah, okay, understood. Under the table stuff. I was like,
Exactly.
I've got a question there.
Exactly.
No, I get it now.
How high are your vineyards?
Our vineyards, our house is at around just over 750 metres of altitude, our house, and they're the lower vineyards we have in the Contrada Crassa. And our highest vineyards is actually the bottle of white that we have in front, so we're at 1,100 metres of altitude.
Shoot.
So
That's a lot of altitude.
So, and it's just beautiful. And we have one other property that is on level of that that's planted to red, and we've planted some white up there, Vigna Pirao. And I mean, there, when I came from Catania last week, it was sunny in Catania and warm. I was in a t-shirt and I drove around the Etna, went to the Frantoio because we make some olive oil, just to taste this year's olive oil and to talk about packaging. And I came to where our guys are working, and they're in the clouds. So as I arrived from a t-shirt, I came and they're that high, but
You've
they were
just
working
gone to a different
in the clouds.
level of atmosphere basically
Yeah,
at this point.
yeah.
Amazing.
And that's also just reminded me of, because I took some photos of Etna as I went around, because as I said, I like to take photos, and you know, it's lovely snow-capped at the moment, and the sun was shining near Bronte. And 20 minutes later, or even 15 minutes later, when I got to our vineyards, you know, the guys are in full jackets, you know, it's cold, it's sort of, you know, everything's wet. And I sort of said, wow, you're working in the clouds. And within 15 minutes, we're actually above the clouds. So the cloud
Amazing.
sort of was in the valley beneath us.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's really cool.
That's bonkers. Are you surprised with the growth of, because you said it was about 20 wineries when you arrived. How many are there now?
Wineries, that people would probably count 100 wineries, but there's probably 180 to 200 different wine producers. So there's a lot of people that have invested in Mount Etna, and there are certain wineries that are doing what we say controterzi, that they're actually making wines. So there's a label. So there's not actually a winery to all those producers, but they may have, you know, a pocket of a vineyard, and someone else makes the wine from them, but they'll, you know, put a label on. So wine producers and wineries don't quite add up yet.
There's a greater understanding at the moment in warm climate regions around the world on white wines. There seems to be a big push towards white wines. We're seeing in Portugal with Cruzado, which is very exciting. Caricante and Gracanico are like crept up on me, to be honest. When I first started encountering those wines, they're just absolutely bonkers. Amazing textural examples. I think it's like Frank Cornelison's Mungebo Bianco. I could have sworn Black and Blue that was rested in oak for several years, but not a lick of oak in it. Are you starting to see locally a little bit more sort of focus on white wines at all?
I mean, traditionally, we're on the northern slopes of Mount Etna, so that was red territory. So when we came, there wasn't really a lot of Caricante planted on our side. It was all the side where Milo is, which is you've got the sea in front of you, and you've got sort of, you know, the sea breezes, there's more rainfall. So that was seen to be the white side of Etna, and where we are was definitely the red side. So being Nerello Mascalese, Nerello Capuccio, and what they were calling Alicante, but we worked out was Alicante from Spain. It was actually Grenache.
Grenache, right?
So we've got some crazy vineyards of, you know, 80-year-old tiny low bush vines of Grenache, which is just delicious. So one wine we make in a Quavery is actually 50% Grenache, because that vineyard has been planted with Grenache there. So we didn't have that much white or much Caricante, but we love Caricante. I mean, one of the wines that took Eric and I to Mount Etna was an old bottle of Petromarina from the 90s that was Caricante that we'd had together up during Vinitaly at the famous Bodega di Vino. And we were just like, wow, what is this? We need to, come down to Mount Etna in 2000 and, we tried it together in 2004. It was just so saline, so pure, so incredible. And as you said, there's a sense that these wines have taken some oak, but no, a lot of the wines, chestnut is the key wood on Mount Etna. So we actually do have chestnut barrels that white wine is made in chestnut. We didn't originally. We brought oak from France, from Burgundy, that we were using for our whites and for our reds. But the more we've sort of learnt and discovered, we just thought, wow, this is incredible. We need to actually revert back to the wood of, choice and provenance in our area. So we do vinify quite a lot of our whites, all of our whites, but, several of our reds now in chestnut wood. And then Grecanico, we just came across these incredibly high old vineyards. And as I said, I've got photo books here for us to look at afterwards. These are literally trees taller than me that are producing these most beautiful, lucid bunches of Grecanico and Grecanico Dorato that we were just eating them in the vineyard. And Eric and I were like, wow, what is this? And traditionally, you didn't pick the white out of a vineyard. You picked everything as a field blend and you took that to your palmento, so to the lava stone building, and you made one wine from the red, white, whatever was planted in your vineyard, and that was your wine. When we first came to Mount Etna, we discovered within all the vineyards that we were purchasing, these old bush vines, there was a percentage of white. And, I was thinking, we don't kind of want that in there. We're making red wine. And then we spoke to some of the older farmers that, everyone comes knocking on our gate and sort of gives us, their 2 cents worth. And back to your story, what was it like being the Australian girl that had come to Etna? I mean, I was the first few years when I was working to Franchetti, people kind of knew where I'd worked in Tuscany. So I was given my weekends, a lot of time to try everyone's aceto or their vinegar or, try and, consult to what was happening in the vineyard, what was happening in the little cellar, why was their wine actually turning into vinegar every spring.
Wow, Jesus.
So it was an incredible sort of opening to the contadini wines, the peasant farmer wines that were being made in the area. So back to this one vineyard we came across with this Grecanico. We thought this is just too good to throw into the reds from that vineyard. And we started to make a little tiny micro vinification for ourselves that, selfishly we were going to drink it ourselves on our terrace. And then as we grew and we purchase more fruit or purchase more vineyards, the opportunity to have more white grapes grew. And so, we started to create Vino di Anna Bianco, and now we have Vino di Anna Bianco G, which is Grecanico, and then we have Jus di Cans Bianco, Palmento Bianco. So now we actually have 4 whites that we don't make every year, but when we have enough white grapes, we'll actually, make a range of white wines from these varieties.
I reckon when Laura and I, it was about a decade ago, it would have been a decade ago that we came and visited. You had probably 2 wines.
Yeah.
And now you have 14?
We make 14 different cuvées, yeah.
What fueled the different cuvées? Were you just seeing different characters across different sites, different winemaking methods?
A combination. I mean, we're always tasting. I mean, Eric, with his work and his passion, is already always tasting different wines from around the world. And, sometimes it's sort of like in the early days was, let's do a skin macerated white, or let's do something that's 100% whole bunch. Or, some old farmer in the area would say, look, I can't work my land anymore. If you work it, and give me some grapes or, give me some litres of wine, you can have the grapes. But we didn't know that vineyard. So everything, everything was a lot of small micro vinifications. And we've both always, because we didn't inherit a winery, we had to create a winery. So, and you've got to have money to buy tanks and things like that. So, sometimes it's just the big plastic food grade tub we found is just such an incredible vessel.
Flower pots, man.
Oh, we've made plenty of flower pot wine.
Wine in flower pots. It's
Some
brilliant.
of our best bangers, I reckon.
Absolutely.
Out of the flower pot.
Which I think, when you have a big vintage, like when you came in 2014 and 2016, sometimes some wines have happened just because, we've received a package, we've gone and picked grapes from a vineyard or a site. Sometimes it's been an experiment that's worked. Sometimes experiments haven't worked and we've had to blend it away. So there's always lots of different ideas why a wine has happened. Sometimes in 2021, the year of COVID, we just couldn't make our wines. We all got COVID. The Palmento Rosso spent more time on skins, so it was no longer Palmento Rosso, which is a 5 days on skins. The Jerrycans Rosato was too alcoholic because it was super hot and dry. We couldn't come out with those two wines. So we thought, okay, let's blend them. So now what do? Well, we're going to have to create another label. And so, but the wine needed a bit of white, and we made a wine called Vendredi 13, Friday the 13th, which was
Very
just
good.
sort of, okay, and we literally blended our 3 biggest volumes. We blended to make one wine, and we called it Friday the 13th. Absolutely bonkers, crazy.
How to go over Halloween.
Well,
Just-
it's quite useful when Friday the 13th
the new
doesn't
Beaujolais
come around
Nouveau
every month, but when it does, I always try and do a little publicity. But again, that's Eric's vision, and him working as an importer and distributor and a winemaker in many capacities. He, always comes up with, okay, well, we've got this situation. We just need to, if we can't drink our wines, we're our biggest critiques. We won't bottle it. If something doesn't reflect what we're trying to do, we then think, okay, well, we're going to have to blend something or maybe not sell that. Making Vino da Tavola, you can actually blend from different years, which initially I could never understand why the likes of who you mentioned before, Frank Cornelis, in the beginning was, we'd have 2003/4. And I'm thinking, but why? Now I really understand that. Sometimes you've got great vintages and it makes sense. And, the year and the harvest gives you wines from, whether it's 2000, everything went in was from 2000. Other times you've got to be a little bit more creative in the cellar.
Of course.
Because we want to make a balanced, stable wine that we want to drink. That's our first thing. If we can't drink it, it's not going to go into bottle, no matter what the commercial side is. And then, our wines, we want to travel with our wines. I want to feel proud to open them and have a story and talk to you about the year, what happened, where we were, and, you want the wines to be able to not be funky or fizzy, or, this term of natural wines is not an excuse for poor winemaking. Or, faulty wines. That's the thing that we strive for. It needs to, actually deliver a wine in the glass that you're going to be able to drink and is stable. You can pour at a bar, you can pour at a restaurant, you can pour at a picnic. So
The definition of natural wine, though, has changed so much in the last decade.
I'm not sure the definition's changed, or the interpretation, maybe.
I think that's actually really good
Yeah,
point
I think
too.
that's pretty spot on.
Because it's funny, like in different countries, Laura and I got put on the spot initially, and we were like, we don't do natural wine. That's kind of not ever really been, what we do, but we kind of get lumped in with a bunch of other producers.
Sure.
And please, thanks, Jess.
No worries.
The definition in somewhere like the States plays somewhere like Australia. Australia's kind of gone down quite an extreme sort of path, 0 or nothing sort of vibe. To the degree that other producers are starting to sort of move away from calling themselves natural.
Absolutely.
Then you have these new nations that are like wines very new to them, like Thailand, where basically if you're not commercial, you are therefore natural. Like they sort of natural is used as a sub-in word for artisan.
Sure.
How has the definition in the circles that you roll in sort of shifted and changed, or the interpretations shifted and changed?
I think people are moving away from marketing their wines as natural. They just want, is it a good drink? Drinkability is the key thing, and that's the thing that we strive for. It needs to, be drinkability, and then hopefully typicity, and, has a story behind it. I think for me, natural, obviously, hopefully has the connotation. I'm referring to our wines more now to be organically grown. I think the growing, because but that's also quite complicated here. I see in Australia, the grapes can be organically grown, but then the vineyard is in the winery. All the tricks of the trade are being used. Yeah. So that was something I rediscovered since we're now back in the Adelaide Hills making wine, that actually, vineyards were being organic. You know, the fruit is organic, but then the
Winery's
manipulation in the winery wasn't.
Yeah.
And, you know, being married to a French and having spent a lot of time now in Italy, but also in France, you know, whether it's traveling through the Jura or the Savoie or the Loire, you know, our friends, they're just vignerons. They don't talk about themselves about being natural. They're just farming the land how they want to farm their land and making their wines that way. Yes, it's natural because it's, you know, they're not using any chemicals either in the vineyards or the winery, or, you know, maybe they're using sulfur, but not even any copper. So, but, you know, I think we need to, I mean, in an ideal world, we'd have to, which will be the interesting thing with the ingredient labeling now that's coming and starting to be, you know, essential in the European markets, and the QR codes and things like that. You know, I wish in some ways we were actually calling what we refer to as conventional wines in our house. I wish we were sort of, you know, we're just making wine. Wine is made from grapes.
It should be.
That's
It should be
in
all
there.
the conventionally made wines that have to justify the
Exactly.
additives, as
100%.
opposed to wines that have no additives having to justify
Exactly.
what they are and different to that.
That's my
Yeah, I
That's what
agree.
we're anchored to.
Totally. Yeah.
That's my dream, that I think we need to go back. Hopefully one day we'll go back and it'll sort of be, you know, this is what wine is. Wine's actually made from grapes and only grapes.
Yeah.
And it will be the conventional wines that then have to say, well, I've used, you know, this stabilizer, I've used that additive or that enzyme, and it's gone through this
Tell me your
process and
recipe.
that process.
I want to know the whole recipe
Yeah.
and why.
Yeah. Yeah.
I suppose copper seems to be the next one on everyone's. Like, we got, as an industry and, you know, consuming public, are quite myopic around sulfur use.
Yes.
But copper, I'm starting to hear more and more producers trying their best to not use any copper.
It's a heavy metal,
I'm not
and
a
it
fan.
stays in the soil
Yeah.
so long. I mean, unfortunately, you know, if you're in an area where downy mildew is an issue, I mean, still copper will, you know, solve your situation faster than anything else than just sulfur alone.
Are there any other alternatives to copper that can...
We're starting to use, because we were in the situation in 2023 of having lost so much of our crop, and we were refusing. But even if you used heavy duty fungicides, which some neighbours did, you were not going to save your crop. It was just so
So bad.
devastating and
was
so
done.
bad. And because, you know, there's no fences, and you've been to Mount Etna, it's, you know, vineyard upon vineyard. So, you know,
What a close.
yeah. And there's many more vineyards since you've been there. I mean, everywhere is planted to vineyards at the moment, which again is a bit of another discussion, a bit of my bee in the bonnet. We're changing a little bit the biodiversity, and, you know, what
More
Eric
contrada?
and I... There's... I mean, yes, more contrada. You know, there's now maps that are out there, but sort of, you know, even land that, you know, is in front of our property has been cleared, and soil been brought in from another place and been flattened, the terraces, and planted to rows, which are now being, you know, going to, you know, potentially the next thing's going to be machine harvesting on Mount Etna, which will just be...
Mechanisation.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're changing what brought someone like Eric and I to Mount Etna, which were the terraces, the biodiversity. You know, all of our vineyards have apple trees, pear trees, cherry trees, you know, olive trees. We leave the wildflowers to grow. I mean, you know, we have bees. We want to eat from the vineyard, which we normally do.
Promoting
There's-
biodiversity.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
I thought I was walking through this. We were at Pietradolce, and I thought I was walking through this vineyard that was just laden with grass. And it wasn't grass, it was fennel.
What?
It's like
That's so
fennel
cool.
everywhere.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I've never seen anything like it before. It's
We have
incredible.
fennel in absolutely, and I think you sometimes, you know, taste it and
I was
smell it in
going
the
to say,
wine.
can you, does
You know,
that
the sausages
transfer?
have got fennel. I mean, we use fennel, you know, like we probably use, I don't even know, a bit out of touch with cooking here. You know, it's probably like what you up using parsley. I mean, our vineyards also, they're full of fennel, they're full of wild parsley, strawberries, asparagus. I mean, you know, we've got a vegetable garden which is, you know, small, but the soil's so fertile, you plant a tomato plant, 3 weeks later you're eating tomatoes.
Wow.
But we don't just have one type of tomato. I mean, even in our tiny vegetable patch, there's normally at least 7, 8, 9 different types of tomato, because it depends what you're going to do with it. You know, are you doing
I feel like I'll be
passata?
coming
Are
there
you doing
too.
a salad? You know, you've got you know the home of the tomato.
And I suppose that goes full circle back to your whole, you know, viticultural and winemaking practices, being organic, being biodynamic, having all that stuff around, using that land for the best of your ability. it kind of all comes together, I suppose. You're making wines to go with the things that you are growing on your property.
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, I think if we're not 100% based on Mount Etna at the moment, so we don't have any animals. I mean, that would be the next thing. And the dream would, to sort of have some animals. There's incredible grain in Sicily. I mean, Sicily is so rich with its resources and what you could do. I mean, you really could almost be off the grid and do everything, from having your grain and, your vegetables, make your own wine, have your chickens for your eggs, etc., and have a pig or two.
This is
So maybe
Frank-
that would be chapter 3 in our...
That's what Frank was talking about, how there's this sort of triple system where you move from grain to grape to olives, and then hit the winter seasons, and then back to grain, grape, olives.
Absolutely.
And just keep sort of farming, you can almost farm in a regenerative sort of cycle in this way.
Definitely. No, for sure. And I know definitely, Ariana Occupinti, who's a good friend, I mean, down the south, I mean, that's what she's got incredible, land down there where there is also sort of grain that they make pasta out of.
No way.
And, their vegetable patches are much bigger. I mean, they've got more opportunity. We can't grow citrus at our altitude, which is really interesting. We're too
cold?
high. Yeah, too high and too cold for lemons and oranges.
That must be frustrating.
But, the local vegetable place will have them and sell them, and they will have only just travelled 10 minutes down the road. Because it doesn't.
It's an altitude issue. It's not a
exactly. It's
geographic.
not a distance. No, exactly. And 20 minutes from us, they grow incredible avocado and mangoes on the coast.
Wow.
It's just carbon-rich, nutrient-rich soil.
Yeah.
You've just got, and because you're already in a hot place and you're adding elevation to it. The moment you add elevation, you may as well be moving entire countries. So you have the ability at every sort of, at different elevations to just grow different shit.
Absolutely, and there's incredible, what do we call them in English? Nurseries. I mean, I've seen on the side of Mount Etna that grow the palms and plants and olive trees that get shipped around the world, and they do an extraordinary turnover. So there's at least 4 or 5 of some of the world's biggest nurseries in our area that because the soil is so fertile, and we do have the rainfall, we do have the sun and the warmth. So
do you thank your lucky stars that you guys bought in when you did? Because I imagine price per hectare these days must be through the roof in comparison.
Yes, I mean, we still do have, there are still some small little producers coming through. You still can do everything on a scale. I suppose it depends on the scale that you want to do, Brendan. I think we, in an ideal world, we farm 8 hectares. For us, the sweet point would be 10 hectares because we do buy some grapes. It's so expensive to farm our land because everything is done by hand. We hoe each vine. We put, fertilizer at the base of each vine. We, at the moment, the guys with a hand motory rower, going in between the rows. There's not a tractor in sight. Everything's tied by hand, of course, hand harvested. So to farm the grapes, there's no money in doing that. So we do buy some grapes as well because we also, we didn't have the money to just come in and buy all the vineyards or the manopera, the people to farm the land for us. But also we wanted to respect, our community, and, some people don't want to sell their land or sell their vineyards to people. They've farmed that vineyard for their life. Yeah. And, some of the people that we buy grapes from, they're in their 80s and they're still farming hectares by themselves. And so, when we go and harvest, one of the grandma will make us a cake. We all sort of harvest together. They're harvesting, we're harvesting. So, for us, we weren't ever set to build, a winery or a wine estate that's going to make money. Hopefully we'll break even one day. The whole thing is part of a journey and part of a lifestyle that we want to live and have, us as a couple, and then our 2 boys, and then, the community that we have and our team. So I do feel it was a great decision. As I've mentioned before, a lot of things have happened a little bit on a whim, and as I said, Eric sort of has these ideas and just why don't we do this? And so I'm like,
go along with it.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Why don't we do this?
Roll with it.
And I do feel very fortunate when we're there, and each time where we bring people, it is a pretty magical place that we have.
Yeah.
Have you brought any flavours of Australia to Edna? with you?
I don't think so. I mean, I think I was drawn to Sicily because I'd been in Tuscany. I mean, Sicily reminds me a lot of Australia. There's a lot of eucalyptus trees on our property, a lot of carob trees.
Hence the wildfires.
Yeah, exactly. I think the Sicilians, everywhere I go, and they know, as soon as they know I'm Australian, they've all got family in Australia, whether it's from Perth or Queensland. But, after the Second World War, a lot of the locals, and that's what happened to the decimation of the vineyards and the wine region, the wine, in the area, was, people either migrated to the States or to Australia. Particularly our area, there's a lot went to Australia. So I feel see a lot of Sicilians coming back. I hear Australian accents quite often in our area, which is really lovely.
Would you believe, so we had a meeting the same time when we came down and met you. We had a meeting at Cottonera. Mm-hmm. And, it was just like every other meeting's booked. Send an email, yep, cool, I'll meet you at this day. Pull up, jump out of the car. There's a person from, like, I guess the front office who handles all the English-speaking, tours and stuff. And, walking across this sort of long driveway piazza style thing towards us. And she was like, "G'day, how the fuck are you?"
Oh.
And we were just like, because we'd been in Italy for like 3-4 months at this point, and so we would just discombobulated. I was like, what is going on? She's like, "Oh no, I'm from Melbourne. I'm just up here working for family." I was like, "Wow,
fantastic!"
And she just got really ochre because she was so excited to see a bit of hay gown sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think she was just having a bit of fun, but I don't. So there's no like Vegemite and Tim Tams on Etna.
Not yet, no. And if they were, they'd all be consumed in my house, I'm sure. So,
so your boys, they like Vegemite.
The Vegemite boys?
I was mortified. I have the tiniest little jar at our house in London at the moment, and I called the 14-year-old. I said, "Oh, what do you have for breakfast?" And, assuming it was a croissant, pain au chocolat, Eric's in the house. So it's dad time.
Yep.
He said, "Oh, yeah, that little jar of Vegemite that Tilly, my mother, sent us? Yeah, I finished the Vegemite."
Wow.
And I said, "Good on you." I was really
And how
quite
many
pleased.
pieces of toast, though, just for reference? This wasn't just like over 2 pieces of toast. He's just getting into
Didn't eat it like Nutella.
Oh, well, I mean, I could do that, but
our
I'm a bit
youngest
gross.
eats it like Nutella, which is quite worrying. I don't even do that. But so no, that's my thing.
I'm
The
very
only thing I
happy
have
to
to
hear
take
this.
home, I mean, fruit chocks are very big in our house.
Nice.
Yes.
Violet
Nice.
crumbles.
Yeah. Violet crumbles.
Farmers Union.
We brought Violet Crumbles back to Adelaide. Did you hear? It's now being made all in South Australia.
Oh, brilliant. No,
Yeah,
yet to catch up.
they
That's
almost got
wonderful
shut
news.
down, and then Mulberry bought it. Now it's being remade here.
I am a little bit upset that Waitrose is a sort of upmarket supermarket chain in the UK. Waitrose, and I'm a bit upset because I just thought I was quite rare, and now stocking Tim Tams. I saw someone with one in their trolley the other day, and I literally grabbed this man. I said, "Oh my gosh, where did you find that?"
Where did you find
and
that?
he was like looking at this strange woman. 'Cause, we're in the UK, we're not quite so huggy-feely. We hug everyone, you kiss everyone. Even back here in Australia, in the UK, you don't talk to your neighbour. And he was sort of, "Oh," and then he heard my accent. He said, "Oh yeah, I'll fine. There's only 2 other packets left." So I sort of, went.
Oh, wow.
I went home and I said, "Look what I've got," but it wasn't quite the same as receiving the box from my mum, who religiously sends.
The care package has that little bit of extra something in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, normally sardwinder soup in our house.
Yes.
So flipping it around though, Nord-Sud. What's Nord-Sud? What brings you back here to make wine?
So Nord-Sud is basically COVID. But we couldn't come back. So this was a COVID project. We couldn't come back because of, the restrictions, and only I have an Australian passport at the time. And so we couldn't see my family, and we were due for several trips during that period. And my parents, who will probably listen to this, were, they're getting a bit older. My father's, going to be 81 soon, and my mum's late 70s. So we just sort of thought, look, we needed to, and again, this is Eric. I remember we were here, and when we could first get entry into the country, and our kids aren't vaccinated, and they were meant to be vaccinated from the UK coming into Australia, but Jules was 1 week off by birth date, which, not needing to be vaccinated when they could come into Australia. And so Eric and I left them with mum and dad, they hadn't seen them for a couple of years, and flew to Melbourne. And I was like, I just need to see my parents more. It was really quite sort of moving and upsetting not seeing them and my brother. So I said, well, let's make some wine. I said, what do you mean make some wine? So I said, well, we've got so many friends in the Adelaide Hills. You used to make wines up with, at Petaluma. He said, why don't we just, let's have a chat to a couple of friends up there and see, whether we can make some wine. So we'd come back from, 24 hours in Melbourne, and said to mum and dad, right, well, we're going to make some wine next vintage. And, Eric, true to that, then flew back sort of, 3 months later, had already sorted out some grapes. A good friend of ours had moved from his house to his property in Basket Range, and, we talked, can we rent some space? And, thankfully Gareth said, yeah, sure, absolutely. And
Oh, wow.
again, I would have thought it would have been Vino di Anna, one wine. Already in the first harvest, 223, we were making
That'd be very
11,000
fitting.
bottles.
11,000 as a side project.
So
Wow,
we make
nothing but halves.
4 wines.
So it's
from
been
the
successful,
223.
I would say.
It's growing and we're having a lot of fun. It's very different, I have to say, to making wine here. 2023 was our first harvest and we made a Blanc, a Rouge, a Pinot Noir and a Chardonnay. So we decided,
Wow.
we'd sort of
Kudos.
stick with, making the varietal wines from the specific sites in the Adelaide Hills. And then we'd also sort of bring a little bit what we like to do of, make a Blanc and a Rouge, so, a red and a white, that we really don't want to talk about the varietals. We want to make a good, juicy, drinkable
Awesome.
red that, is Australian, so it's actually Cabernet Shiraz with a little dollop of a few bits and pieces,
Love
a little bit of
this.
Grenache,
Okay.
Pinot Noir.
Awesome.
And the Blanc, when I showed it to a few friends here in the industry, they're like, never tell people what the grapes are.
Yeah.
Because it's
Is that
Chenin,
preconception?
it's Chenin, it's Fiano, there's a dash of
Love
Chardonnay,
it.
there's a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc, and there's Riesling. So it's absolutely a nightmare if you think about it. At the time, we just, literally the first harvest, the fruit had to be organic, friends had to have grown it, we had to be able to hand harvest it.
Yeah.
We didn't get to hand harvest everything because I didn't realise labour here, how expensive it was, or it just wasn't available to do the harvest.
Mate.
It's
It's especially in comparison to like grape picking around the world.
I don't even want
It's
to,
bonkers.
our guys though, don't even want to admit what we pay our guys to pick.
Yeah,
A day of work on Mount Etna is just crazy compared to what these guys, it's probably what they earn a day is what you'd earn an hour here. I'm not joking.
Yeah,
Wowee.
it's nuts. It's bonkers, and it never used to be that way.
No.
There was, and it's like I speak from a point of having to pay, for it. But it does really narrow the decision around whether or not you do hand harvesting, which is actually kind of a shame.
100%.
To be honest, because otherwise, like it kind of rips out half the amount of different winemaking decisions that we have open to
Absolutely.
us. Very, very frustrating. It's like $40 an hour or $50 an hour sometimes.
which is why you get your full-time staff to go out and pick for a full day sometimes, Brendan,
Yeah,
right?
but some of these pickers, though, and this is the justification. Some of these pickers, they're good and
Yeah.
they're quick
And their speed and
nuts.
because
Yeah.
that's how they're paid, aren't
Yeah.
they, as well?
Yeah.
So for us, 2023, we came with all these ideas, and I remember Eric was calling me because he was here originally. He's like, we thought we were going to hand pick it, and suddenly I sort of get to see a photo, and it's sort of a bin arriving of machine harvested fruit. I'm thinking, well, that wasn't quite what we were going to do with that Riesling. He said, yeah, just it's.
Go with
It's
it.
what it is.
Yeah, it is. So for us, again, that's our literally it's our motto: go with it.
Yeah.
It's part of the journey. And again, we've had some beautiful clay pots made for us, some
Lovely.
amphora, because we make a range of wines in Quavery.
Did you use
from
Bennett's?
Georgia. Sorry.
For it, did you use Bennett's down in McGill for it?
No, we actually use a potter. Another long story that is near the Central Market that was making
Oh, no
pots
way.
for the
Fantastic.
Botanic Gardens.
Oh, sick.
And so he made us a series of beautiful amphora of different sizes. So the Pinot Noirs made all in the amphora with whole bunch and
Wow.
some destem fruit. And then the Chardonnay, again, the Chardonnay's, in puncheons. Again, we wanted to make wines that, were expressive of where they came from, and have sort of a minimalistic winemaking techniques, but yet some thought of where they're going. They're not going to new wood. We didn't want to just make everything in stainless steel. That said, the Rouge and Blanc are made, a mixture of puncheon and stainless steel. And it really depended. We didn't quite know what we were going to make that first year. It depended, what phone calls we could make of friends. Hey, and I don't want to go into names, but we all know, sort of all the rock stars that are up in the Basket Range and Forest forest range. I mean, we were just very lucky. Friends were very generous and said, well, we've got 1,000 kilos of that, 500 kilos of that, 800 kilos of that. So, you know, we ended up having lots of little parcels of fruit and wines we made, and then
amazing.
sort of had to think, okay, what are we going to turn these into? So hence why it ended up being a Blanc and a Rouge. And then, you know, the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay were, you know, sort of some incredibly crazy vineyards that, you know, again, 500 kilos fell out of that vineyard that we could hand
fell
pick,
off the back of the truck,
or
sort of
you know,
thing.
someone else had a little bit more, and we're very lucky at the generosity of the people like Gareth that, you know, we can
Of course, yeah.
have created this little project, and brings us back more. So, you know, we're now back at least 4 or 5 times a year, which
Oh,
is
wow.
yeah.
So you're just constantly traveling.
Well, that's the thing. COVID was quite good for us because we couldn't travel because we were traveling a lot. And I have to say, we didn't quite think about how much we'd have to travel back here. But luckily, I mean, Eric came for 3 days last week. He came to Australia literally for 3 days. I'm a little
How
bit
do
more...
you even recover from jet lag within
He
3
didn't.
days?
He
No,
didn't
you just
sleep.
stay.
You just stay awake?
No, you stay in a different time zone.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Jess, he didn't sleep, and he didn't recover. There was
Oh my
no chance. He
goodness.
arrived on a Monday. He left on a Monday, and he was back at our house on a Saturday. So he didn't change time zones. So, you know, he just sort of worked all the time.
Yeah.
Because obviously, you know, he's got lots of other businesses
Yes,
on
of
the
course.
go. And so for me, I like to do things a bit more leisurely because, you know, the whole reason is to see family and friends
Of
and,
course. Yeah,
and
yeah.
reconnect, and having so much fun.
Oh,
It
good.
really is.
And you even managed to get some fruit from down the road here.
We
Just
did.
literally.
Yeah.
So it kind of fit really well on
Not in the
today's route.
223 vineyard vintage, but 224. So, you know, I mean, down the track with, you know, we obviously need to market and sell these wines and have a story behind them. So that we need to be securing fruit each year. I mean, at the moment, it is just really, it does have to be farmed organically, not necessarily certified organic because we're not certified organic. And we want to, you know, small nuances. We offered some crazy Chardonnay from Lenswood, which we didn't in the first vintage. It all came from Oakbank, and the Lenswood that I'm about to go and taste and do the blend, Eric just said it adds another esk and acidity and freshness to what we already had. Some
Cool.
delicious fruit from Oakbank. I mean, I obviously grew up making wines in the Adelaide Hills, so I mean, I've biased to a few slopes, and it was kind of like, I really know that slope, I really know that vineyard. Can we? And then, you know,
Of course, from the Petaluma days.
Exactly. A few twisting of arms of, you know, people that initially were in different jobs that are now very successful grape owners and grape growers. I mean, there's a lot has happened since
Because the industry
90s.
is big and it's small all at the same time, isn't
Definitely.
it? And all things sort of come and go around.
Definitely.
It's interesting the comment about organics, because we looked at organic certification literally like a month ago.
Yeah.
And went through all the numbers on it. It's so expensive.
Right.
And the only benefit to the customer is the right to say that you're organic. And it is, I guess, a trust mark, but ultimately it would have meant for us having to actually increase the price of certain wines to be able to recoup the cost of it. And so we kind of weighed it up and we were like, the customer's just getting stung for a trust mark. I'm not too sure if it actually offers any real inherent value or change of flavor or something that's like substantial. Can certainly understand it from maybe a grower's perspective.
Yeah, definitely. And people ask more for organic fruit, which happily will pay because, you know, there's a risk factor that has to, you know, be done to grow it.
It's a bit of a rort, a little bit. Like the grower pays a certain rate, which is significantly lower than what the winery has to pay.
Right.
And it scales with the winery, doesn't scale with the grower.
interesting.
So if we end up making more wine, you end up having to pay it's something nuts, a couple of % of rev.
Goodness me.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So it kind of it immediately, we looked at it because, you know, we sit on more the value end of the spectrum of pricing.
Sure. We definitely with Nord-Sud, you know, we're inexpensive. The Blanc and the Rouge end up, you know, that we're wanting them to be, you know, $21, $22 on the shelf.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
you know, I mean,
Yummy.
But even the Vino di Anna wines, I mean, we make wines that we will sell from €8 up to €25 a bottle. I mean, that's to sell to our distributors.
That's a really, really
But
good sort of spectrum to be in.
we want people to drink our wines.
Yeah, you don't want to gatekeep
no,
your product, but still
no.
make that affordable quality thing that we can all enjoy and love.
Absolutely, Jess. I mean, if we make 120 bottles of a wine, and it's been a process that, there we feel, okay, we're justified to maybe charge €20 for that bottle.
Yeah.
Not crazy prices. I mean, it ends up being crazy prices once they end up getting on a restaurant in New York, etc.
Yes.
But again, I think that's something definitely,
That's out of your
living and
control.
working with Eric has taught me that, you want people to buy your wines, whether it's the first time customer. So, I mean, that's why I suppose Vino di Anna makes so many wines, because we were sort of, the cost of production was getting higher and higher and higher for some of the wines we were making. But yet we wanted people to actually discover Etna Red. So, we kept making a less expensive red again and again, just because we wanted people, to be able to see what Etna Red is and, have that experience and think, oh, actually, that's really interesting. Maybe I should look for something else. And then, you've got wines that offer something else at a different price point.
Yeah, of course.
Sort of moving up.
But
the
also
range.
rarity, scarcity, different contrada as well.
Yeah, definitely. Whereabouts with, Nord-Sud, it is meant to be a juicy red, a drink, a crisp sort of, flavoursome white. And then, Pinot and Chardonnay just, sort of, and there's a Grenache that potentially will come out, depends on this afternoon's. We got some delicious
Adelaide
Grenache.
Hills Grenache.
Adelaide Hills Grenache with just down from the top of the Fleurier Peninsula.
Oh, lovely.
Nice.
Very cool little spot. Get a nice little sea breeze
Very
coming
nice.
through.
Oh,
So
awesome.
we'll see. We've got some labels that we're relabeling them that I'm quite excited. The next 224s, which is hence tomorrow's meeting, will be about relabeling and actually sort of launching the brand with some other labels. But yes, it would be quite nice to have a juicy Grenache. And having tried Dylan's, if only.
Are these available yet, these wines?
Yeah.
They are?
We
so
do
how would they be able to buy them in Australia?
So we work with Principal Wines, based out of Melbourne, but Principal sell our wines, across Australia.
Both the Etna as well as the...
the Vino di Anna range, and then they've just started working with Nord-Sud a few months ago. So,
Cool.
That's my job to spread the word and to be in Sydney next week and do a couple of events with people. And Eric was in Melbourne last week, but sort of share our story and this part of the journey that we're doing. So,
fantastic.
Exciting times.
Anna, we need to let you get to Gareth's place because you're about to be late.
No problem. Thank you. My phone hasn't beeped yet. So thank you both very much for your time.
I could have talked to you forever.
Oh, mate, thank you. Thank you for just coming on up to humble little Gumeracha as well. Seriously, it's uncanny that you're even in Australia, let alone here. So
the
very
timing
cool
was
to show you around.
great. So thank you very much, both of you, for having me.
Pleasure.
Real
Thanks,
So
Alice.
lovely.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
Bye.